John Carro is a New York trial attorney with Carro, Velez, Carro, and Mitchell. So, John, explain for us then this Supreme Court decision. I understand it's a bit technical, so explain it so we all understand.
It's actually a very technical decision, and in many ways the court ducked the real issue, but they gave an indication of where they're going to be on this position. And that is that the federal government, what they did was they set up an enforcement program to help the states to collect money from deadbeat dads.
Right.
And what they did was said we would pay 2/3 of the money, but you have to meet certain requirements in order to follow through.
Okay.
And basically Arizona happened to be one of the states that really wasn't diligent enough in going after the deadbeat dads. And they were monitored by the federal program. The mothers obviously were not satisfied, and what they did was they brought a class action and went to the federal courts and wound up in the United States Supreme Court to force Arizona to be more aggressive in their collection.
Okay.
The court basically said, first of all, they sent the case back to be reconsidered at the trial level to see whether their claims were adequate under the law. That's when it gets very technical. But underneath that, what the court is basically saying is they're not looking to expand individuals' rights, that the federal court now has to oversee these types of things in addition to everything they must already do. There is a reluctance in this court, it's a relatively conservative court, to now open the door for individuals to go into court for looking for enforcement of states' rights and these types of issues.
Now, you think this is a good decision. Why is that?
Well, it's a good decision in that the federal courts are already overwhelmed. And what it is, this federal law that pushes the states in the direction of enforcement has its own built-in procedures, which the court mentioned, to make sure there's compliance. And it's a sort of carrot and stick approach. The federal government will audit you, and if you're not in compliance and you're not in substantial compliance with the law, they can withhold funds. The states are desperate for these funds because it's not just enforcement funds, these are federal welfare funds.
Now, I want to make clear that we're saying deadbeat dads, but we know this also applies to women as well. But this case related to women suing the deadbeat dads. But shouldn't the states take some responsibility for collecting child support payments, because states are receiving federal money to do this?
Well, that's why I think the decision is not a bad one, because the real way to combat this is on the state level. And the state right now, for instance, New York State has been very aggressive, and there are a lot of things being done, and collection is really, you know, the old days you get a court order, you couldn't enforce it.
But that's why women sued, or this group of women sued, is because the state wasn't doing its job. So what recourse do they have then if you're saying this is the state's responsibility?
But
who do they turn to?
This case was, the state wasn't doing its job under the federal guidelines, so they're looking to do it in federal court. The problem here is it's really a local state issue, and what it is such as in New York, where the state gets aggressive and you garnish these salaries. You go after, in New York, they suspend your driver's license. Now, as of yesterday, they're going to computerize it. So what they do now is they stop you for a routine traffic check. It comes up, you suspend the license, you're a deadbeat, you owe child support, you're arrested. That in New York State last year garnered $70 or $80 million additional money, and they collected through these enforcement provisions, salary, tax refunds they take. They brought in over $700 million last year in New York State back in. That is why the federal government, to use the federal government to do this, I think is a misguided approach. It's forcing the states to be aggressive. And the way you force the states to be aggressive is you offer them a financial incentive.
So that's what you mean by aggressive measures, what New York State is doing, for example.
Right. Now, Arizona, admittedly, was not a good state. Percentage-wise, of all the states, they were one of the worst in terms of forcing compliance. But with the federal government in this particular program in the lawsuit, their audits and the threat of withholding money, Arizona came around.
Okay, well, we will be right back with more on Fox on Family and another opinion right after this.